Good morning, readers. Well, today is the release of not just one, but three more books. So you can now get Knows the Hills and Spanning the Creek and Sanctuary in the Stream are all available now. Those are books 7, 8, and 9 in the Parks Pat Mysteries series. And Margie, Christina, Moushoom have captured the hearts of many in those books, and I hope that their adventures and mystery solving continue to bring you joy and entertainment, and that you enjoy those. And if you have been watching my blog posts and my social media lately, then you know that Sanctuary in the Stream is my 100th published book. That's quite a milestone for anybody to reach, and so I also am inviting readers to celebrate that with me. I have an online meetup this evening, 5 o'clock Mountain Time, and also a face-to-face meeting tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon if you happen to be local to Calgary. I would love to see you at either one of those and hope to get a chance to chat with some of my readers and just celebrate that whole thing together. And there are a couple of deals in my e-store. One of them is that there is a $1 off coupon where you can get $1 off each ebook that you purchase today. And there is also my 100 book deal that gives you all 100 of my published books in a bundle. That's not just one big book on your reader. It will actually come as 100 separate books, and that's available through BookFunnel, so you can load it onto your reader or browser or however it is that you read your ebooks, and you will have 100 individual books delivered to you for the very low price of $100. That's $1 per book, saves you about $500 over buying them all separately. So some of you have already signed up for that. Maybe we'll get a few more orders for it today as well. And on to reading. I like to start my launch day with a reading from the new book released. So I'm going to read from Knows the Hills, book number 7 in the Parks Pat Mystery series. And then this afternoon at the online get-together, I plan to read from Spanning the Creek. And then tomorrow at the face-to-face get-together, I should be reading from Sanctuary in the Stream. So hey, if you get to all three things, then you get to hear an excerpt from each one of those. So this is from Knows the Hills. They took Margie's car. Even though Margie had initially planned to bike from home to the downtown office, she'd still not managed to do so. She was still driving and not getting that extra bit of exercise she had promised herself. But it was a lot handier to have a car when they had a murder scene to get to. Calgary was a huge urban sprawl, and it could take an hour to drive from one end to the other. Not like the cute little English villages on TV that a copper could patrol on his bicycle. Have you ever been to Nose Hill? Jones asked. No, Margie couldn't see the big hill yet, but she looked in that direction anyway. It looks like it's pretty bare, just grassland. That's only the part that you can see from the road. There are valleys full of trees, great view of the city skyline, wildflowers in the spring. Lots of people walk their dogs there. Jones had been to Margie's house and had met not only Christina, but also their dog Stella. She knew they enjoyed taking her for walks in Calgary's numerous green spaces. Though it was September, most of the grassy areas had been scorched brown and yellow by the sun, and the leaves were losing their chlorophyll as winter approached. The nights were getting chilly, and though it hadn't been below zero yet, the trees knew that winter was on its way. Maybe we'll take Stella out there to explore, Margie said. Margie had entered the coordinates of the body into her GPS unit, so she followed the directions of the electronic voice the best she could, with Jones giving her a few warnings of lane changes she needed to make or turns that were coming up sooner than they appeared to be on the GPS screen. Eventually, they pulled into a dusty parking lot. A couple of marked Calgary Police Service cars were parked already, which told Margie that they were in the right place. They took off their office-appropriate blazers, which would be far too warm for walking through the park, and left them in the car. Margie grabbed her scene of crime kit and they headed into the park. The yellow-brown hills were speckled here and there with trees or large sandstone rocks. There were scrubby rose bushes, and small clumps of wildflowers past their bloom. There were not many people on the trail that Margie and Jones began to walk up together. The hill was steeper than it looked, and they were both slightly out of breath before long. Margie slowed. She didn't want to be huffing and puffing when they got to the scene, and Jones was heavier than Margie and not having the easiest time with the climb. "We came here a few times as kids in elementary school," Jones puffed. "It didn't seem like such a climb then. As kids, we just ran up it." "Did you come as a class?" "Field trip," Jones agreed. "End of the year. A special treat." Margie looked around. There weren't any playgrounds or picnic areas that she could see. Not really the type of place where she would have expected the school kids to see as a treat. "It was fun," Jones shrugged. "Anything to get out of the classroom." "I guess so." Margie could see a couple of police officers down in a coulee below. As Jones had said, plenty of trees grew in the more protected areas between the hills. They reached a footpath worn in the grass and followed it down into the valley to meet with the law enforcement officers below. "Parks, Pat?" one of the masked constables asked, with a smile in his voice and a fan of wrinkles around the corners of his eyes. "That's me," Margie agreed. "How far do we have to go?" "Not far. It's just around the corner of this wooded area here." They led Margie and Jones through the trees until they arrived at an area that had been cordoned off with yellow tape. A couple more officers were guarding the scene. "So, what have we got?" Margie asked, getting closer but staying outside the perimeter. The sergeant said, "A slasher?" The constable made a noise that was neither agreement nor denial. Margie got to an angle where she could see one side of the body. It was, as MacDonald had warned, a bloody scene. Margie could see long gashes down the woman's arm. Slasher certainly seemed apt, despite MacDonald's suggestion that it might be something else. She shrugged at Jones and put down her scene of crime kit. She unzipped it, and they each pulled on protective suits and booties to reduce any contamination of the scene. They crossed the yellow tape and picked their way carefully across the area to get a close look at the victim. It was a woman, as Margie had discerned from outside the perimeter, a slim woman with Asian features, hair just longer than her shoulders. Young, an older teen or young adult. Margie's stomach clenched, immediately associating the victim with Christina. What had happened? Why had she been attacked down in the coulee, and who had attacked her? Was it just a chance thing? Had she been chased or stalked? There were numerous gashes and slashes, but as Margie got closer, she could see that there were also puncture marks, and flesh had been torn away. She shook her head, shooting a look at one of the CPS officers standing outside the cordon. "This is an animal attack." He gave a nod of agreement. Margie rolled her eyes. She and Jones stepped back from the body, returning the way they had come. "No need for homicide here," Margie said, somewhat exasperated. Those bites and slashes were not caused by a human. "Not a homicide," the cop agreed, "but it was called in as one, so I need to sign off." "Fine, I agree. Not a homicide. Is the medical examiner on the way?" "Should be here any minute. And we really don't need crime scene to collect anything, since this is not a crime scene. Who else? Do we call Alberta Fish and Wildlife?" "Calgary Parks. They've been informed and will send someone over to investigate. And then they'll probably call Alberta and they'll determine the best response." Margie looked regretfully at the woman who had been killed. What was it? Cougar? Bear? "Don't think so," said a smaller officer, who had been quiet until that point. "Looks like coyote." "Really? I thought coyotes were shy, avoided people." The man stepped forward so they could converse more easily. Margie realized he was not just small, but must have been fresh out of the academy, and the academy appeared to be recruiting babies now. His name bar said "Young," and Margie suppressed a chuckle at the appropriateness of his name. "There've been a number of coyote attacks in the city," Young offered. "They get habituated to people, and then they aren't afraid enough to stay away anymore." "And a coyote could do that?" Margie glanced in the direction of the body. "Maybe more than one of them. Usually it's just a bite or two and then they run. But in this case—" Young trailed off. Obviously, that hadn't happened. They had attacked viciously and not been deterred by the victim screaming and fighting back. "Could they be rabid?" Margie speculated. "Could be. Not that it's going to make any difference to our victim." No, she was past being worried about getting rabies, but they would want to protect the public if the animal were rabid. "Do you have an ID on her yet?" "We'll wait for the ME or a matching missing persons report. Haven't searched her pockets." As Young said, it was best to wait and let the ME's death investigators handle it. They were the best positioned to see what trace evidence needed to be preserved. Margie could check for a missing person report, and when she returned to the Margie could check for a missing person report when she returned to the office. It seemed like someone should have noticed the young woman was missing. She appeared to be clean and well cared for, not homeless with a camp set up somewhere in the trees. However, there might be others around who did make the park their home. "Are there any homeless camps around here?" She addressed her question to all of the police officers there. They were presumably assigned to the area and would know whether there was a problem with people camping out in the park. "Not that I'm aware of," one of the older cops answered. "Residents in the area are pretty quick to call in if someone sets up a tent. They're not allowed to camp in the park. We move them along." "Why?" He shook his head. "It's pretty obvious this was an animal attack, not a human." "Oh, I know. I just thought that there might be witnesses. If someone was camping out here, they might have seen or heard something that would be helpful." "Suppose so, but we don't really need to know anything else. What difference will it make to know when she was attacked or how long it took, or if she screamed?" He shook his head heavily. "No witness statement will make any difference to this case." "I suppose not." Margie scratched the back of her neck. "I'm just too used to dealing with homicides. An animal attack is a new one for me." "What makes you think it was a coyote?" Jones asked Young, turning back to face him after gazing at the woman's body. "Are you that familiar with the differences between bite marks and claws?" Young shook his head. "Coyote scat." Jones looked at him blankly. Margie could see her trying to process this concise explanation. For someone unused to dealing with wildlife, scat was a verb, not a noun, and Jones was probably trying to come up with a full sentence or explanation that made sense to her. "They're droppings," Margie informed her, looking around at the ground. Within the yellow-taped barrier were a couple of piles of coyote scat. "Like that." Jones leaned closer to study one of the deposits, her nose wrinkling in distaste. "And how do you know that's coyote and not bear? It looks like there are berries in there. Coyotes don't eat berries, do they? But bears do." "Coyotes are very opportunistic," Young told her. "Berries, small animals, garbage. Their droppings don't look like dog crap. A dog that just eats dog food out of a can, their turds are all smooth and evenly colored. Not like these." The ropey, knotted-looking coyote scat, full of berries and bits of fur and debris, were quite different from what Margie picked up after Stella did her business. She wouldn't have identified it as belonging to an animal in the dog family at all. She probably would have gone with bear, as Jones had suggested. "Coyote, then," she agreed with a shrug. The medical examiner's van appeared, some distance away and making its way very carefully over the rough terrain, with no proper access route. It eventually crawled to a stop a few feet back from the tape, and one of the investigators climbed out to have a look. "Once you have confirmed that the victim is dead, and this doesn't appear to be a homicide, I can be on my way," Margie offered. Despite the nice weather, she didn't really want to hang out at the death scene all day. Okay, so there you are, a reading from Knows the Hills. And you can pick those 3 books up today, and I hope that you will join me at one of my celebrations, either tonight or tomorrow. I hope to see you then.